Friends, relatives, strangers, and enemies, welcome once again to another episode of the Texas Conservative Channel. We're here on this channel. I have made it my own personal business to talk about the flaws and the failures of the Democrat Party and the damage that that party is doing to our nation. It's political season once again, and in political season you have primaries, so it's going to be unusual, but it will be necessary. I'm going to talk about somebody that should not be a Republican, and I'll let the audience ponder on who that might be. I'm pretty sure who everybody knows it is, and you'll find out here who it is shortly here on the Texas Conservative Channel. In talking about Democrats and talking about national security, one must bring up the subject and the person Bill Clinton, the former president. Bill Clinton falls into the category of national security weakster, and the reason why, fellow citizens, is because of the documentation provided by Lieutenant Colonel Buzz Patterson. Lieutenant Colonel Buzz Patterson carried the nuclear football for the former president, and he has already wrote in books, one of his books called Dereliction of Duty, about how Bill Clinton lost the codes to the nuclear weapons. Now think about it, fellow citizens, of all the things that a president could do. He lost the codes of the nuclear weapons, the authentication codes. He had no way to confirm to his generals that might request use of nuclear weapons, or he had no way to send orders to those generals if he needed to use nuclear weapons. He would have been unable to confirm that he was the president. That's one of the dumbest things that a president has done in recorded history. There's nothing more grave. As well, Lieutenant Colonel Buzz Patterson has documentation in his book where he came to the president and they had Bin Laden, a chance to kill Bin Laden, and Bill Clinton passed on the opportunities because he didn't want to stir everybody up. He passed on it on several occasions. One of the times he was with Monica Lewinsky when he passed on the opportunity to get Bin Laden. So passing on killing Bin Laden and losing the nuclear weapon codes makes Bill Clinton fall into the category of national security weakster. That's what he is, and it cannot be denied. Nobody will be able to make comments on my page at the bottom of the video I'm making now that will be legit. If you think you can, bring it on. Try and explain why it was okay for Bill Clinton to lose the nuclear weapons. Post that you still think he's a good president. How stupid can you get? Now, in talking about national security weaksters, you certainly can't pass up the current president of the United States, Barack Hussein Obama, who is on record as saying Bill Clinton was a great president, even after the knowledge became public that he had lost the nuclear missile codes. So that makes one want to ask Barack Obama if he's got his nuclear weapon codes on him. See, all these Democrats are national security weaksters. He's pulling out of Afghanistan. We're pulling out of Iraq. Basically, that's handing Iraq and Afghanistan back over to the terrorists that are going to use those nations again to do America harm. And the welfare budget, and in the way that Barack Obama is spending money, you know, very, very irresponsible, because none of it's going on defense. the welfare budget has took away from anything that we can spend on defense. You know, Barack Obama has hindered any incoming president with so much debt. Now, those troops that he's pulling back, again, are leaving those nation states. It's leaving them to the will of the terrorists. You know, the Taliban's going to take back over that nation, and we're just going to pretty much give Iraq to Iran. So sometimes it may seem like a popular thing to do, to pull those troops back from those war zones where enemies train to hit America. But in the end, it's not the smartest thing to do, because it leaves us with vulnerabilities. The more places that we're not in, the more Islamic nations where terrorist training goes on. If we don't have military presence in that region, all that does is to lead to more pat downs at the airport. So that's not necessary. We don't have to wage the war here. We can wage it over there where the enemy's trying to train. And again, Barack Obama also falls into the category of national security weakster, because he's pulling out of the regions. He can't sit there and talk a war game, but yet pull out of the regions where the war is being waged against us. That's a quit. You know, for one, he's spending the money elsewhere. He can't afford to pay our soldiers. He can't afford to keep the war effort up that protects this nation up, because he wants to spend money on welfare. Bill Clinton, a weakster. Barack Obama, the current president of the United States, he is also a weakster. Now, I move on to Mr. Ron Paul, who domestically has got some good monetary ideas, not all of which I agree in, but on the money side of things, he is a fiscal conservative. But here's where Ron Paul loses ground. Here's where Ron Paul gets categorized with Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. It's because he is a national security weakster. And here is why I say this. Ron Paul's reasoning that we're getting hit by the terrorists is because we're over there. On the surface that sounds good, but when you read between the lines and you look at what actually happened in history, Ron Paul is wrong on those facts. And we have to examine a little bit of history to do just that. Ron Paul likes to claim how he supports Reagan. Oh, but he didn't like the military buildup under Reagan. He didn't like the money being spent on the military. And Reagan spent a lot. Reagan built our military way, way up. It was a very good thing for America, but Ron Paul didn't like it. He didn't like it so much that he wrote a letter to Ronald Reagan that in effect told Ronald Reagan that basically Ron Paul, he wanted to get out of the party for the things that Ronald Reagan was doing and for the things that Ronald Reagan believed in. Now, Ron supporters out there, there's no way you can defend that. You can't, he's not going to be able to have both sides of the issue, Ron Paul. He's not. He's not going to be able to say that he supports the policies of Ronald Reagan and he supports the message of Ronald Reagan and then complain about the money that Ronald Reagan spent and the wars that Ronald Reagan waged. He can't do that. He can't go into the Ronald Reagan library in front of Nancy Reagan and say he supports Reagan, then turn around and diss Reagan. No, sir, we're not going to let that pass on the Texas Conservative Channel, because that's mighty culturally unconservative of Ron Paul. If he's trying to bring in liberal voters and anti-war voters, then those of us who are in the Republican Party are absolutely going to consider that unconservative. Even if he's fiscally conservative, he's not culturally conservative, because Ronald Reagan's message was take war to the enemy. We're not going to take no crap off of anybody, and he was willing to spend the funds conservatively in the right place to build up our military and make sure that that did not happen. And Ron Paul's reasoning, again, He believes that the terrorists hit us because we're over there. Simply is not the case. The facts show that, and here are some of the facts. We had troops in Germany. Some of our troops frequented the bars in Germany. And back when Reagan was president, Colonel Gaddafi, the radical Islamic leader of Libya, who had terrorist networks, sent some of his networks to Europe. And they went into a bar and killed some Americans and a lot of other people. That's on record. Now, I would argue to Ron Paul supporters and all the Democrats and liberals who like Ron Paul that Gaddafi and those terrorists did not go to Germany, to Berlin. They did not go there because of American presence over there. Because America did not have any presence in Libya. We didn't have any troops in Libya. We weren't occupying Libya. So you can understand why Ron Paul was disagreeing with Reagan back then. Because Ron Paul is wrong. He is an idiot. He is a national security wikster. Ron Paul supporters, you've got to understand that Gaddafi did not send those terrorists to kill our troops because we had people over there. There's a thing called radical Islam, and they are upset that we support Israel. They don't like it that we're the most powerful nation on earth. They don't like all the freedom that we have. That is a fact. Now, as well, when you examine Bush Sr. and how we went to, Ron Paul likes to complain that we shouldn't have went into Iraq. You know, he sounds like a Democrat. He sounds like Barack Obama, Joe Biden, and anybody else. Ron Paul seems so much that he should be running for the other party. He almost seems disingenuous because I think he's not so stupid that he doesn't know that the Republican Party as a whole does not support his message. The Republican Party does not have to agree with Ron Paul for anything, but if Ron Paul wants to get the nomination, then he's going to have to agree with those of us in the Republican Party who actually vote for the candidates. He's going to have to do that, or he doesn't have a hoot in hell's chance of winning. We don't have to conform to him. He's got to conform to us, or he needs to just move the hell on out of the Republican Party. He's a national security wikster, no different than Bill Clinton and no different than Barack Obama, and that is a fact. Now, again, Iraq. If you'll remember, and if you understand what acts of war are, the claim by Democrats and Ron Paul is that America had no right to attack Iraq because they didn't attack us, and that's just not the facts. You know, after Reagan was Bush Sr. And if you'll remember, those of you who pay attention enough to history, you'll remember that Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. Okay? Well, what does that mean? That means he's took all the oil in Kuwait. But how then did he wage war on America? I can explain that to you folks. Saddam Hussein, when he took over Kuwait, allowed the Russian ambassadors there in Kuwait to go back to Russia. He allowed the Chinese ambassadors. He allowed all the ambassadors of all the foreign embassies. He told them to shut down, that Kuwait was part of Iraq, and they could go on home. But folks, if you remember, when it came to the American embassy, that wasn't the case. Saddam Hussein definitely came in and told our diplomats that Kuwait was part of Iraq. But I'll be damned if he let them go. He held them hostage. Armed guard. Iraqi soldiers guarding our embassy, keeping our people from coming home. That was an act of war by Saddam Hussein and his military on the United States of America. There's nothing that anybody can say that's going to make it anything other than what it is. Not Bill Clinton, not Barack Obama, not the left-wing anti-war idiots, none of them. None of them will have the reasoning enough, nor will the wannabe Democrat Ron Paul be able to do anything. Because that is a fact. They waged war on America. And part of the ways and means in which that war ended, and part of the terms and the surrender documents basically that were signed, the documents that understood we'd stop kicking their ass if they'd do certain things. And part of those things was that he couldn't fly his helicopters, he couldn't move his troops around, he couldn't shoot at our planes that was enforcing the no-fly zone. So again, when Clinton came into office, Saddam Hussein started shooting at our planes, and he started moving his troops around and massacring people because Bill Clinton, the national security weakster, was letting him. And when Bush Jr. came into office, George W., the terms under which Saddam Hussein had surrendered in the first place were re-understood. It was understood. Just because Bill Clinton lagged in his responsibilities didn't mean that George W. Bush was going to do the same. George W. Bush had every right as President of the United States to finish up on the war that began with his father. Why? Because his father wasn't president when Saddam Hussein was violating the damn resolutions and the terms of his surrender. No, it was George W. Bush. So George W. Bush took it to Saddam Hussein and finished the war, because in the beginning, again, Iraq attacked the United States. They held our people hostage. And there's nothing that anybody can say that can deny that. And now enter Barack Obama, Barack Hussein Obama, who ran on promising to pull our troops out of the Middle East. And he's doing just that. You know, he claims to want to fight Al-Qaeda, but our troops are pulling out of the region where Al-Qaeda is. We're turning the fight to Al-Qaeda back over to the minimal Afghan army. It's going to go back to Taliban hands real fast. And Iran is taking over Iraq. These dumb military moves, all this talk by Democrats of fighting the war on terror but not doing it. You know, we've been attacked. And the Democrats and Ron Paul don't understand it. Ron Paul cannot separate himself from Barack Obama and Bill Clinton. We did not go over there for no reason. We went over there because that is where the war on terror takes place. That's so the war on terror doesn't go on here in New York or LA. You know, that's so we don't have to fight it here at the airports and at the screens. We don't have to constantly look around. We've been forced into a state of paranoia by the terrorists, because especially, and that's going to manifest itself when we pull out from the region. You know, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and Ron Paul are national security wixters. You know, Ron Paul supporters, you're going to have to understand it. That it's called the war on terror. They're not hitting us because we're over there. We're over there because they're hitting us. Get your head out of your ass, Ron Paul supporters, because you've got the cart before the horse. And folks, there's always something new here on the Texas Conservative Channel. Culturally conservative, fiscal conservative, it all gets talked about. It all gets pointed out. It's blunt, I understand, but it's the truth. And when you've got the truth on your side, it's hard to argue with the truth. So friends, relatives, strangers, and enemies, I'm sure you've been enlightened. I'm sure some of you are laughing, and I'm sure some of you are pissed off. And if y'all all want to feel the same way again, come on back to the Texas Conservative Channel, and we'll see you on the next episode.